Video games are a lovely source of entertainment. You get to jump into a crazy world and do things you would never do in the real world, like hang out with friends. There's definitely a lot of fun to be had. I customized my Rocket League car to look like a bird. His rocket boost looks like bird poop, and when I win a game, I just let that stuff fly everywhere. The future is now. Gaming is a multi-billion-dollar industry based on escapism. Forget about your real-world troubles, come play a game. And you know what another multi-billion-dollar escapism industry is? Reading, but that's not what I'm talking about. The movie industry. Forget about your real-world troubles, come sit in a dark room with a bunch of strangers for a while. And watch a movie, don't just be in the dark. This isn't I Am Legend. Anyway, these two industries have been trying to cross over into each other for decades, but it very rarely clicks in a way that really works. Hollywood will put out video games that are based on movies, but they often just end up feeling like an afterthought tie-in product. They feel like in the movie's marketing meeting, some guy was like, alright, we're gonna make some toys, we're gonna make some t-shirts, maybe a video game, and I don't know, a lunchbox. Let's get crazy and make a lunchbox. So yeah, they usually suck. Enter the Matrix was pretty good. Bullet Time, oh, that's slow motion. But yeah, no, they're often quite bad. What I'm interested in for this video though is not those ones, but rather when the process goes the other way. When movies are based off of popular video games. It almost never works, neither critically nor financially. Resident Evil had a relatively successful run of movies, but that's about it. People don't really like these things, and people don't really pay to go see these things. But despite that, which you would think would be important, there are apparently movies in different stages of development right now based on Borderlands, Call of Duty, Mega Man, Uncharted, The Last of Us, Gears of War, Metal Gear Solid, Minecraft, Mortal Kombat, Splinter Cell, Sleeping Dogs, The Division, Just Cause, Dante's Inferno, Fruit Ninja, and even freaking Tetris. I'm out of breath, but how are you gonna make a movie about Tetris? Don't do this. Sony even announced in May 2019 that they're launching PlayStation Studios, so they can work with Sony Pictures to make a bunch of video game movies. These things are not going away. But why? They've made something like 35 video game movies, and most of them didn't really work. It's kinda nuts. I mean, after Catwoman and Elektra came out, Hollywood swore off female superhero movies for like 15 years. Okay, so alright, let's dive into this, let's figure this out. How this all got started. I don't really want to dive too deep into the history of video games here. There's already a documentary about that. It's called Pixels. What I will say though is that in the late 80s and 90s, Mario was a phenomenon. People were like, oh hell yes, that plumber is, oh, just let me control that frickin' plumber. I'm so into this. Oh, does he shoot fireballs? Well, of course he does. He's a plumber. That makes perfect sense. He frickin' punches bricks and shoots fireballs just like they show you in plumber school. Oh, by the way, if you want to learn a bunch more about Mario games and video games in general, our friends over at The Gamer have you covered on that. Lots of cool stuff, go check them out. Anyway, Mario games became so popular that it became pretty much impossible for Hollywood to ignore. So they decided to give it the Hollywood treatment, and by Hollywood treatment I mean make it insane. They took a, relatively simple story of trying to save a princess from a monster, and they were like, okay, but what if the meteorite that killed the dinosaurs created an alternate dimension? What about that? What if King Koopa looked like a human, and what if this whole thing was a thing? What if we basically borrowed some names and terms from Super Mario Bros. And then just did whatever we wanted? And that's what they did, and thus the video game movie was born. And it didn't go well. It made back less than half of its $48 million budget, and it was called one of the worst movies of 1993. So not a great start for video game movies. That was then followed up by a Double Dragon movie, which did even worse. If there hadn't been any other video game movies already in production at that point, that might have been the end of video game movies. At least for a long time, maybe 15 years, who's to say. But there were some movies in production, so those ended up happening. One of them was Street Fighter, starring Jean-Claude Van Damme and Kylie Minogue for some reason. Why was she in this? That's weird. Critics hated the movie even more than Super Mario Bros. Or Double Dragon, but there was a big difference this time around. It made like $100 million off of a $35 million budget. And if you crunch the numbers, if you really sit down with a calculator and figure this out, that's a profit. They made some money. There had also been a Mortal Kombat movie in production, so that came out too, and critics were like, hey, now this one right here, this is, also not very good, to be honest. But it made $122 million off of a budget of like $20 million. So arguably Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat set us on this path we're on today. They showed that, hey, it's possible to make money off of video game movies. You can do it. And most importantly, it doesn't really matter if they're good or not. Why they're rarely good. So Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat kinda set the bar pretty low quality-wise for video game films. And man, they haven't really risen over that bar. 2019 was the first year that video game movies got Rotten Tomato scores higher than 60%. That was Angry Birds and Detective Pikachu. It took like 26 years to get a passing grade on one of those things. And I know a Rotten Tomato score isn't the perfect indicator of a good movie, but I mean 26 years! That is one full Will Poulter, that's nuts. So why are these movies so badly received? Well, first off, I think a lot of it has to do with how we connect with characters in the different mediums. In a movie, the filmmakers want you to connect with the protagonist, right? They want to make you empathize with them, so you want them to win, and you want to buy their toys and think about them when you're back home. They do this in a bunch of ways, usually through some kind of variation of what's called a save the cat moment. That's a term coined by Blake Snyder. It basically means the character does something that's the right thing to do. It's based on Ripley from Aliens saving a cat. People were like, hey, this character's alright, I like her, she's cool. Some examples are Aladdin giving his loaf of bread to the kids. Oh, what a nice dude, he worked hard for that. Indiana Jones saves some child slaves. I think that's pretty nice. Hellboy saves a cat, kind of on the nose, but wow, what a gentleman. Now, if I'm gonna go see a movie based on a video game that I've already played, I've already been the protagonist. And I'd argue that any save the cat moment the movie's gonna present me with isn't gonna be as effective as in other movies. I've already saved the cat myself. I did that. Look at me. I'm the nice guy now. And I also injected myself into the game and story. Maybe I did a bunch of weird stuff before the mission just for fun. That's me. I did that. Also, a lot of times, not all the time, video game characters purposefully aren't super crazy developed so that players can inject their own personality into them. In a game, you are the protagonist. You get to infuse your own skills and intellect, and you control the character movement. There's a deep connection there. But in a movie, the player's contribution isn't being reflected up on the screen. It's usually just like the default reading of the character from the cutscenes. It's just like sitting down and watching all the cutscenes of a video game, How do I skip this? How do I skip this? How do I skip this? That's probably part of why streaming is so popular. You don't want to just see the video game character run around and solve problems. You want to see a streamer with a big fun personality make a show of it and infuse him or herself into this thing. Like if they make a Red Dead Redemption movie, I'm not gonna connect with their version of Arthur Morgan as much as my own, because my Arthur Morgan spends 3 hours trying to get an alligator to kill a guy I just kidnapped. Not gonna see that in the movie. At the end of the day, being in charge of a stressful fictional situation is usually gonna be more fun than watching a fictional character be in charge of that same situation. Movies also tend to have a problem when it comes to the actual concepts of video games. Games are made to be played for hours and hours and hours, till you're like, wait, how is it 2 a.m.? I started playing at lunchtime. Hollywood doesn't seem to really know what to do with that. Sometimes you'll get a movie that's vaguely based on a video game premise. You're like, okay, you pretty much just used the name of the game and then did your own thing, okay. And then you have other ones where they try to cram a bunch of mythology into a single 2-hour movie, and you're like, oh, well, that's too much, please stop. So because of those things, and I'm sure a whole lot of other factors, these movies are almost always critical failures. They just tend to not work. So let's get real. Why do they keep being made? Why they keep getting made? Major blockbuster video games make more money than Hollywood movie blockbusters. Everybody went nuts when Avengers Endgame crossed the $2 billion mark at the box office. Like, holy guacamole, what a big number. $1 million isn't cool. You know what's cool? $2 billion. Double Timberlakes. And okay, great job everybody, that is very impressive, but let's take a look at Grand Theft Auto 5. It made $1 billion in its first 3 days of release back in 2013, and thanks in large part to GTA Online, as of May 2018, it had generated generated $6 billion in profits. I don't care how many people buy Avengers Endgame on Blu-ray, it's not gonna make $4 more billion in the next 6 years. GTA 5 has been called the most profitable entertainment product ever. If you're a Hollywood movie producer sitting in another industry based around selling storytelling and entertainment to people, those are some attractive numbers. If video games can attract an audience ready to drop that kind of money, that's hard to ignore. And those audiences are really the key to why these things keep getting made. See, when you boil it down to its essence, the job of the grand majority of decision makers in the film industry is to place bets. When a studio greenlights a movie, they're betting that if they invest several million dollars into making a movie, there's gonna be enough interest from people to pay money to go see it and buy toys, and they're gonna make a big old profit. When that doesn't work out, when a movie bombs, that's rough for the person that greenlit that movie. That's a very public failure, a very public message that, hey, I made a bad decision. Look at me, aren't I bad at my job? Their investors aren't happy, the bosses aren't happy, nobody's happy, and it sucks. So not only are these decision makers placing bets, they're placing bets with scared money, and scared money usually plays things safe. The fact that we get countless sequels and reboots and there's this big lack of original movies is actually pretty understandable when you look at it from that perspective. Take something that's been proven to work and do it again but slightly different. That's a much safer bet than doing something completely original. This same logic works for video game movies. Put yourself in the shoes of a movie executive for a minute. Here's a little scenario. Your boss gives you, say, $100 million and you need to greenlight one movie. One screenwriter guy comes in with a completely original idea. Sounds like a lot of fun, people would probably like it a lot. But this thing, as of right now, only exists in the mind of this screenwriter guy. That's where this thing lives. Nobody in the general public has any opinion on this thing. Then another screenwriter guy comes in and he has a script that's based on a video game that sold 40 million copies last year and has an avid fan base. Which one of these two things seems like the safest place to invest your boss's money? Obviously, it's the one with a concept that's already made a bunch of money and people already love and doesn't just exist in one guy's head. Movies have a much better chance of being made if there's something already established and successful attached to them. Hollywood even attaches things retroactively now if they're not sure about a movie. I'm looking at you, 10 Cloverfield Lane. Will they ever be good? So because they already have existing fan bases and name recognition and whatnot, video game movies probably aren't going anywhere. Are they ever gonna be not crappy though? It feels like something still needs to click for that to happen. Kind of like pre-MCU superhero movies, you know? Before the Marvel Cinematic Universe launched, a lot of comic book movies were just kind of there. A lot of them weren't great, but when Marvel embraced the interconnectedness of comic book storylines and found a way to translate that to the big screen, it blew people's minds. Hey, that's that guy from that other movie, now he's in this movie, that's nuts. Video game movies still need that type of breakthrough, I think. That unique element that makes them into something really special that draws people out to the theater. Maybe in the same way that movie theaters all started having 3D glasses a decade ago, we'll soon end up in a world where they all have VR headsets or something. I don't know, I'm not a future scientist analyst guy, but at the end of the day, because of the reason for which video game movies are usually greenlit, studios trying to cash in on an existing audience, it might be a while before we see a video game movie that's really a can't-miss kind of film. The people that are greenlighting these movies are doing so because it feels like less of a risk, and to make something really new and inventive, you need to be willing to take some risks. Take a chance on that young, new, visionary writer-director guy. Adapt a little indie game instead of a massive blockbuster. Be a risk taker and it might pay off in a massive way. Of course, that's easy for me to say because it's not my money and I'm not the one signing the multi-million-dollar checks. So good luck out there, movie producers. You'll figure this out. Thanks for watching that video, guys. I hope you liked it. Once again, shout out to our friends over at The Gamer. If you're interested in video games, they have a whole lot of videos over there that you're probably gonna love. Definitely go check them out and tell them that ScreenRant sent you. Also, hey, let me know in the comment section here if there's a game you think would make a great movie. Let me know down below and check back soon for a new video.